And so, why am I talking about Darren Veighey or Darren Veighey of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission? Well, to restate, when I phoned the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, I reported to them that I felt like intelligence agencies were attempting to try and radicalize asylum seekers as they have done with myself, and that this was a very disturbing situation where law firms are being influenced by intelligence agencies not to take a case of a person who is being victimized here in Belfast. We weren't a minute and 30 seconds into the phone call, and he intentionally hung the phone up in my face. And why is this important? It's important, ladies and gentlemen, because I really want to discuss Darren's role as a threshold guardian. And to understand what a threshold guardian is, I want to build on Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers. Now, Christopher Vogler's book is really about, writing something in fiction. But the threshold guardian is a very real concept. And so I want to give you a piece of this. We're going to get into this, and then we're going to analyze Darren's position as a receptionist and how this role acts as a threshold guardian. So Vogler says that all heroes encounter obstacles on the road to adventure. At each gateway to a new world, they are powerful guardians at their threshold, placed to keep the unworthy from entering. They present a menacing face to the hero, but if properly understood, they can be overcame, bypassed, or even turned into allies. Many heroes and many writers encounter threshold guardians, and understanding their nature can help determine how to handle them. Threshold guardians are usually not the main villains or antagonists in stories. So is Darren Veighey the main villain in this situation? No, he's not. He is just a receptionist. He is a person working for the Human Rights Commission. He's not the main villain. It is the intelligence agencies that are influencing the behavior of Darren that prevents Darren from doing the right thing. So let's continue. Often they will be lieutenants of the villain, lesser thugs, or mercenaries hired to guard access to the chief's headquarters. They may also be neutral figures who are simply part of the landscape of the special world. So I would argue that, I can't argue that Darren is a neutral figure here, because he has taken an active role in preventing my access to justice. He has essentially ringed off on human rights violations. In rare cases, they may be secret helpers placed in the hero's path to test her willingness and her skill. I don't think that Darren is placed in my path as a secret helper to test my skill or to test my willingness to understand transnational repression or to understand transnational organized crime here in Northern Ireland. To be sure, last year when I visited the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, I saw Darren and was broken down to some degree. Like my resolve had broken, and in that moment of weakness, I saw a smirk and a grin on Darren's face. This is a true story. And what's interesting here, ladies and gentlemen, is that all the times that I had visited the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and, maintained my resolve, maintained my resilience, throughout that entire process, they were rude and mean and dismissive to me. But the moment that I showed some sort of, that I showed them that I felt humiliated by what was happening, did they show a level of, I think, how can I explain that? It was almost, they were overjoyed by that, the very fact that I was humiliated. And it was when they invited me into the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, they invited me in just, and I want you to think about it. Before they invited me in, they made me stand out in the hallway on multiple occasions. And the only time they invited me in was when I had lost my resolve, and they invited me in that day so that they could, take what they felt was left of me and to use that again as information to suck that information out of me so that they could persecute me. Now, this is my personal feeling about the situation. When I was at the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and Darren opened the door and he saw that I was broken, he had a smile on his face. And it was as if he was like, yes, finally, right? We broke her. And they allowed me into the office. And I guess at that moment they felt, okay, well, now that she's broken, she'll say something wrong and we can use this information or we can send this information back to the powers that be. They can use it against her. And to reiterate, this is my personal opinion about my interaction with Darren and the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. I'm entitled to my own opinion, and if there is a disagreement about the interaction, then they're welcome to have a discussion with me about it. So let's continue. So Vogler argues that there is often a symbiotic relationship between a villain and a threshold guardian. In nature, a powerful animal such as a bear will sometimes tolerate a smaller animal such as a fox nesting at the entrance of its lair. The fox, with its strong smell and sharp teeth, tends to keep other animals from wandering into the cave while the bear is sleeping. Interesting, right? Interesting. And I don't think that in this situation that I find myself in, can I say that Darren is a fox, somehow being allowed to sit before the lair or to lie before the lair of a bear's cave. Let's continue. The fox also serves as an early warning for the bear by making a racket if someone tries to enter the cave. Now that may be part of Darren's role, right? Is to make this racket to prevent me from being able to access the commissioners and to talk to them about my complaints. Now, last year, I did have a very short, brief conversation with Allison Kilpatrick. There was some brevity to that conversation because I really wanted to go into detail about my complaint with her. And she did promise that she would have a discussion with me personally, but again, intelligence agencies intervened and intelligence agencies instructed her not to. So I want to go to what else is I want to go to another point that Vogler mentions. So Vogler says that let's look at the psychological aspect of threshold guardians like Darren. These guardians may represent the ordinary obstacles we face in the world around us. So Vogler mentions bad weather, bad luck, prejudice, oppression, or hostile people like Darren at the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission that actually stands in our way of justice. It says that it seems every time you try and make a major change in your life, you have these forces rising up, right, to test you, to see if that you're going to accept the challenge. And so let's get to the dramatic functions of testing. So testing of the hero is primarily dramatic function of the threshold guardian. When heroes confront one of these figures, they must solve a puzzle or pass a test. And you may say, well, Kiana, how is Darren testing you? What puzzle or what test are you solving? Now, let's look at the first one. You could say, well, Kiana, maybe Darren is put into place to test you to see if you are a skilled researcher in transnational repression. Maybe he's there to see if you understand the phenomenon well. And I would argue against that. This would not be done. There would be no reason why you would have a person working in human rights that is pushing a person without really knowing their limitations, pushing them away from justice, which I believe is done intentionally, to test whether they understand transnational repression well. To understand that, right, to test to see whether a person understands the phenomenon of transnational repression well, that's done in the academic sense, right, in the academic world, such as the university, that they actually stopped me from doing. So I would argue, no, Darren is not trying to test to see if I understand transnational repression well enough. But here's something interesting. Vogler argues that threshold guardians are the task for heroes is at this point is often to figure out some way around or through threshold guardians. Often their threat is just an illusion, and the solution is simply to ignore them or to push through them with faith. Other threshold guardians must be absorbed or their hostile energy must be reflected back onto them. The trick may be to realize that what seems like an obstacle may actually be the means of climbing over the threshold. Threshold guardians who seem to be enemies may be turned into valuable allies. Sometimes the guardians of the first threshold simply need to be acknowledged. They occupy a very difficult niche, and it wouldn't be polite to pass through their territory without recognizing their power and the important role of keeping the gate. Okay, so let's unpack that, okay? Darren is a receptionist at the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. And you are correct, or Vogler is correct, that it is important to possibly be kind to Darren and to not make waves. And that was my first strategy when I approached the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, was to be kind and to not make waves. But then there was a consistent pattern of Darren and the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission turning me away. And this demonstrates that kindness and being respectful, although this is what I'll continue to do, was not working in this situation. And you may say, well, Kiana, why were you not able to turn Darren into an ally? He's Irish. He seemingly has the same historical background as you do. For example, there was once a point in time where Irish people were looked at unfavorably and were not treated respectfully in history, and perhaps Darren acknowledges that and understands that to some degree, right? So why weren't you able to bring him over to your side? And I would argue the reason why I was not able to bring Darren over to my side and to make him an ally is because I don't have any power. I don't have legitimate power, so I'm not in a position of authority. I don't have referent power. I'm not really charismatic. I speak my mind, and I don't say it in a way that I guess is very charismatic. So I'm not charismatic. So I don't have referent power. I definitely don't have reward power, so I can't say, Darren, here, I'll give you $10,000, or excuse me, 10,000 pounds if you forward my complaint and convince the commissioners to take my complaint. So I don't have reward power. I don't have coercive power because I am just an asylum seeker. The only form of power that I do have is possibly expert power, and that is understanding transnational repression and understanding how the phenomenon works. But when you look at expert power, and then you put expert power and you compare that to all these other forms of power, these other 4 forms of power, and you have a person in the dominant society occupying or using those forms of power, it acts as like an ace card. It trumps this very little power that I do have at the academic level. Okay? And so that explains why I'm not able to bring Darren over to my side as an ally. But more importantly, why I'm unable to get through to the paralegals and the secretaries and the receptionist of these law firms. It's because, again, you have an intelligence agency, possibly NISOS Group Limited, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, federal agencies in the United States, in the UK, the United Kingdom and the United States are part of the Five Eyes, and they, being part of this agency or this group of states, comes with a lot of power. And so whose side are they going to take? Are they going to take a person with no power who is just studying transnational repression and trying to build themselves up? Or are they going to take the power of a person in the dominant society, a person who looks like them, who speaks like them, and who is actually giving them an incentive to not forward a case to solicitors, not forwarding a case to the commissioners, not forwarding the case to the United Nations. So, for example, when I spoke to the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission last year, and I think I speak about this during the Mimicking McCarthyism series, I had asked the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission if they could forward my complaint to the United Nations. And they said no. Flat out said no. And I want to sit with that for a moment, and we're going to unpack why that is.